Y'all been real busy in the city.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So we just gonna, basically have a laid back conversation, talk to y'all about, what y'all been doing in the work. So, basically want to start off by asking, how was United Footwork created and what was the mission?
Yeah, so at the center of it, it was pretty much just trying to understand the dynamics of decision making in Fort Worth, and how there's misrepresentation as it relates to people in power, and doing the things necessary to assure that our communities feel that those institutions, that those spaces, that those decision makers are being reflective of the communities who are being directly impacted by huge issues. So kind of the birth of United Fort Worth was young people seeing that, in the Latinx community, Chicano community, Mexican American community, whatever you want to call it, seeing those leaders not stepping up and doing anything about issues that were impacting undocumented people. And in particular, this was in 2017, there was a piece of legislation that passed called State Senate Bill 4. Essentially what that is it was a legislation by the Republican legislature that was creating a law that gave police officers the ability to ask individuals their immigration status. And essentially what that is, it's a pipeline to, being stopped by a police, being asked the status, and expediting the process of deportation. A lot of times it's traffic stops, for speeding, for DUI, minor things that individuals, for the long part, can go through probation and try to do the things that they need to get that situation fixed, but they get deported. Mm-hmm. And we thought that this was an injustice because this is clearly discrimination by a majority white legislature who is trying to undermine and marginalize undocumented folks, brown folks, black folks who are undocumented, and continue to expand the system of deportation and criminalization. And so we looked around as young people and saw none of the folks who are in these positions, who are Latino, who are POC, are doing anything to put on force on our city council to say, hey, y'all better join on this lawsuit that is going to sue the state as a city to demand that this law be found unconstitutional. Nobody was doing anything about it. So we said that's enough. We're going to start organizing and start building power. And it just started as like, let's do something. Yeah. And it's turned into like a meeting of like folks trying to say, let's do some stuff. And then before you knew it, like 20 people showed up, and then 40 people. And then it just created this movement. But that was a huge key that like folks are needing spaces, not only for the immigrant community, but for black and brown and, all folks, to build power in solidarity to really challenge these systems, and create more spaces where we can amplify the voices of communities who have been forgotten, who have been ignored intentionally by white supremacy, and just call it out and start building power so we can have, our voices listened to, but in a real political way, in a way that reflects the honesty of who our communities are, what those needs are on policy, on equity, on so many different issues. But from there, we understood that it shouldn't be one-dimensional organizing. It's not solely immigrant folks in Fort Worth who are being directly impacted. It's black folks by police brutality. It's poor people by gentrification. It's an array of issues. So that's when we started like really being intentional on creating a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-socioeconomic status movement of people who really understand this concept of, our liberation is tied together. Like, we are the only ones who can free ourselves. So since then, we've been doing some badass organizing that is deeper than surface level of like, elections, all the like the basic stuff. Like, we're really like trying to understand these systems, teach ourselves collectively what these systems mean, and try to create a new world that really like centers humanity and not capital.
Yeah, I mean, the mission is simply, what Daniel has already talked about, is to mobilize people in our community to fight against systems of discrimination, injustice, and oppression against marginalized communities, black, brown, low wealth, poor, LGBTQ, all of the communities that have been historically marginalized. That's what United Fort Worth is here for, is to organize with those folks, right? Because we are those folks.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. We're directly impacted. This is our life. And so it's all about really empowering people to know that, yes, you do have a voice. Yes, you do have power. And yes, these are the avenues that you can take to exercise that power and to change what you see happening that you don't like, that's hurting your community, that's hurting your family. And so that's really the heart of everything that we do.
Facts. And it's sort of decolonial framework, like understanding that those in power created these systems intentionally. Like they were created by someone. Like they were created for folks to hold power. And it would be naive for us to say, nah, them fools aren't organizing anymore. They're not spending resources to hold power. They are organizing. The POA is spending thousands and thousands of dollars to continue to keep their people in power so that they can create policy that protects them, that supports them, that finances them. I mean, just today I saw on social media that they have this crazy new, anti-ballistic tank.
Oh, wow.
That continues this like militarization of the police. So we're counter-organizing what what the people in power are doing to continue to keep hold of segregation in Fort Worth, to keep hold of white supremacy of the Fort Worth way. So what we're doing is we're a counter-narrative to that. And we're intentional in the way that we really understand that, resources shouldn't only be put into nonprofits who a lot of the times like waste resources and don't even put those resources into our liberation, and are afraid to be political. They're afraid to be political and be honest about the stuff that's going on. We're not. Like, we're going to speak truth to power every single time, no matter who has a problem with it, no matter how radical we have to be, and also try to do our best to bring folks within the movement together. Because honestly, like the more folks that we have in the movement, the more pressure we can put, and the more access we have to communicate with our communities so that we can get consent from them on what kind of work we should be doing. A lot of the times, like, we read these books and we see these posts and we think we have all the answers, but our folks in the streets have the answers. Our folks in the communities have the answers. But it just takes a lot of resources and investment and time and healing and taking care of each other. We've been talking about a lot about healing and how we can keep each other safe while we do this work. But the mission is very much centered on our collective liberation between all folks who have been oppressed and marginalized through capitalism, through white supremacy, and violence. I mean, it's straight up violence. Whether it's a black girl being, overly targeted in schools and the detention rates in Fort Worth ISD, or whether it's these racist white developers who are trying to gentrify Stop 6, Como, Northside, Poly, all that has to be called out, and we all have to figure out how we could do this within our spaces and have a common mission,